You and I, we chat about a lot of things. I wanted to talk a little bit about a blog you put out, I think maybe a week and a half ago, about humans becoming the long pole in the ERP tent. We're on the forefront of Microsoft ERP and CE, and we talk about AI and we talk about Copilot, and we talk about all these tools that we're trying to use, our customers are trying to use, everyone's trying to figure out and how those are promoting, I think, a different landscape. When I think about when I got started in ERP, everyone's like, oh, have fun for the next 3 years implementing that system. And, all these long decision times and SLAs, and you're creating all these contracts that take forever, and you're working with all these different partners. But now with all these advances in technology, companies want to scale faster. They want to build faster. They want to do things differently. I guess first off, what drove you to write this blog, and then maybe we can get into some of the points that you have in the main thesis.
Sure. Yeah. I think the kind of the inspiration behind this blog is exactly what you mentioned, but what kind of drove me to finally write it is I was just sitting in a lot of sessions, frankly, at MVP Summit, and they were talking about changes that potentially could happen in the next 18 months. And I had finally challenged one of the sessions in the room. I said, like, hey, we are talking about change management in terms of ERP and old school ERP implementations. And we should be shifting a mindset on how do we leverage a faster cycle time for change management and adoption, because that's at the end of the day, a lot of ERP transformations, typically die with bad adoption, and they typically die with bad training. It's not always the technology that fails. It's like a heart transplant, if you will. So if you if the surgeon does everything they were supposed to do, there's still a likelihood that that heart never takes, and that's not necessarily the tech lead or tech architect or the solution architect's fault. But it's like there is some change management that is part of this. So I kind of challenged the room, and we kind of shifted that discussion. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like I should write about this. So I think with AI these days, a lot of leaders are thinking like, oh yeah, the I'm seeing it here at Kafka Code. I'm seeing it just talking to other end users at user groups, where the mindset is changing of like, hey, we've got this rough swag of deploying a new module or doing an upgrade, where it's like, oh, lower that'll be like a 12 to 18 month thing. And now people are changing that mindset of like, yeah, well, what is it? April probably can still finish it in 2026. And you're like, timeout. That's probably too complex to do. But as we're seeing folks like challenge that idea, it's like, why is it too complex to do if AI can, help configure Dynamics 365? And why is it too complex if an agent can go in and do a proper fit gap analysis and, you know, come up with the right FDDs and develop those, and then send it to an agent with that's going to deliver the TDDs, and then send it to another several agents that deliver the X plus plus, right? Like, I don't think we're that far off from all of that. Now that seems very pie in the sky, but I don't think we're very far off from some of that becoming true. And then we're immediately talking about humans are the slow part of this implementation. Where in the past it's always been data migration, and it's always been like configuring all of these integrations and developing custom ones.
Yeah. And I want to pick on some of the phrases and some of the things you hit on in this article. So, one of the reasons why we say I think that maybe AI hasn't gotten all the way there, or there's not full investment or buy-in from companies is how we are normally structured to absorb change, like you said, at the speed that it's now coming. Humans, whether we're talking about technology or anything else, debate, conflict, difference in opinions. socializing those change, breaking them down at the various levels, management, top down, bottom up, from the floor, all those things take time. They're not as black and white when humans are involved. So that's a big challenge is absorbing that change. And then you get into, okay, it's not just happening faster. Okay, we can get through things faster, but does that mean we're doing less? Because if
Right.
I can get through now 5 FDDs in a week, those 5 FDDs are now ready for review. They're not necessarily spaced out where somebody else had to review them. So even if we can automate certain things, get the auto creation of the FDDs, get things into certain templates, that approval level still needs the foundation that we need to build, right? If you have good business analysts that have the structure you want, and hey, we need to do negative testing and we need to capture these scenarios for a warehouse application we're building, that still needs to be there. Otherwise, that speed is just there for speed's sake, and you might lead to rework or other conflicts. Um, what have you seen, I think, either from your clients internally at your own company, maybe it's other things you're doing to help prepare for that piece of it, the change management side, the people side, to say, hey, we're going to be doing things differently. We need to get ready for it.
I think there's a couple things. So, like, I think you're absolutely right. The fact that we can provide AI today with a template for our FDDs and like a brief executive summary and tell them to go at it can drastically accelerate development. We see a lot of firms already doing this for like statement of work generation, and we're seeing a lot of firms do that with RFP responses. Now, I think you hit on this point where it's like you're only accelerating one of the things, and there's like an inherent baton that needs to be handed off. And the way I'm understanding your question is like, how do we talk about that part? How do we kind of start to socialize that within our existing processes or existing clients? To me, I think it's like just like anything with change adoption and change management, it's you start on day one with that. So I like to start on day zero, where it's like, hey, we haven't even started work with you yet, but I'm gonna start some expectation setting, and it's very much of a, hey, this is typically a X day turnaround, and we're going to need you to make accelerated decisions, or your expectations need to change on the entirety of the project. So setting those expectations and giving them that ownership, to me, I think is just kind of step one. So step one for me is always like enabling the customer, enabling the end user to be part of that journey. And as soon as they take that baton with you, you've transferred that ownership from an SI or an IT team to the subject matter experts. And that to me is the key to change management and adoption. And it's no longer, an IT project. It's no longer SIs delivering something to them. It's developing with the company. So that to me is always number one. The Ironically, on my blog, I don't think I listed that as number one. I think
I'll
on my
fact
blog,
check you.
yeah. I think on my blog, I probably would say like, let me just pull it up. Also, if you're going to fact check
Is
me,
this the stop measuring readiness like it's a
yeah,
soft side issue?
yeah. So,
Is that relevant?
um, to me, I think like we have this like concept, and you brought up SLAs also is that expectation setting. So to me, I think is we need to transform from like, hey, get this at your earliest convenience, to, hey, let's transfer this into, hey, in the next 24 hours, I need a decision, or this will effectively delay X, Y, and Z. So better project managers, enabling them to kind of push that ball rather than, inevitably like checking the box. It gives them a little more like agency and autonomy. To me, I think Um, the other part of this is kind of shrinking those decisions down to be more tangible. So I think a lot of times in steering committee calls, we see a lot of success where it's like, hey, these three decisions need to be made on the call. Um, Here's an A and B, or here's option A and B. Here are the pros and cons. Here's our recommendation. And those, at least in my experience, have been like, yes, they can be very high critical decisions that need to be made, but they're also, you know, isolated decisions where, hey, this isn't going to spider into like an overarching decision that like, hey, you're going to feel this for the next 9 years if you decide wrong. It's very, it's almost like I would say a talent over a skill, where it's like being able to inherently transform a decision point from complex to simple is, in my opinion, what is a differentiator in architects as well. So um, plenty of architects out there in the world can explain what the system does, but the greats can explain it to the people who aren't bleeding F&O every day. So I would say that. Of course, you guys can read my blog if you want to read the rest of the answer, but those I would say are the top three.
The last one, they want to have to read the blog, so I do want to talk about it. I think there's a lot of relevancy, and I have some thoughts around it. I'd be curious to hear yours. And measuring adoption and behavior, not attendance, and that's a big thing I think in our industry, in general, is could even be a customer issue. They come to you, they say, we're doing budgeting in Excel, we're doing master plan in Excel, we want to get out of it. And it's like, okay, what is the end goal? What is the KPI? What is the problem you're trying to solve? I can get you out of Excel and into the ERP, and you might be doing it at the same speed and not making any revenue and not reducing inventory or providing a more accurate budget or whatever it might be you're trying to do. So I think one, being upfront with what are we truly measuring, what are we adopting. I like the quote you have that says, here for AI, tell me whether planners changed how they run supplier review. Are they just doing the same thing but in a different tool? Is that really adoption? Is that really
Right.
success? Tell me whether buyers stopped using side spreadsheets. We just went over that example. Tell me whether warehouse leads follow the recommended exception path, or finance trusts a close analysis to shorten review cycles. I think even Microsoft is talking about an inventory close agent they now have to help expedite that cycle. But are people trusting that data? Are they working with that data? Are they actually shortening the cycle, or are they just
Right.
now using the tool? I think that's an important note, and I think a lot of companies don't do enough time really aligning before they jump in with a partner on an implementation project or an optimization project. They know they want to stop doing something, but they don't have the best answer of why, or what's going to be made more efficient, or what's going to go away if they do it. So I like that point. I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle for companies looking at adoption of any technology. But going, I guess, to the next piece. Let's say we're all invested. We get buy-in from everybody. Um, what's the next thing for companies? Who's going to be able to take advantage of change absorption for AI and all these technologies we have?
I think I first off, great question. To me, I think measuring adoption and behavior is like that maturity model or maturity level. So I think traditionally speaking, you jump into an ERP project, or even in pre-sales when you're talking to a prospect, they're kind of financially motivated to move to the ERP, and they've got this in the back of their mind of, hey, this is going to cost a lot of money. The licenses are more expensive. How can I get potentially more expensive, I should say. So yeah. What is my ROI? Like, why are we moving to this? And I think IT Valp 2.0 talks about this a lot, on the maturity model of companies, where they view IT as a cost center? Do they view them as an enabler? I think this is another one of those measurements in a company's maturity model is, how are they viewing ROI? Are they viewing employees as team members, owners? Are they viewing adoption in the same way? Are they viewing like, hey, we're going to transform how our buyers are enabled to procure. We're not going to just transform the application that they open in Chrome, which, like, effectively that is not really changing their job. Now, I think once you get to that, and once you kind of elevate yourself as a company, and frankly as like an executive leadership team, making this decision to go to AI and go to an ERP, that's when you're starting to see companies accelerate into using AI. And that's when you're starting to see the true adoption. Now, that's more of an answer of top down. I think there is a possibility from like a bottom up perspective as well. There's a wonderful book out there that talks about how leaders are not necessarily driven by titles. There are leaders at every level. So at an individual contributor level, all the way up. And that's the difference between a leader and a manager. A manager is a title. A leader is somebody who doesn't lean on any title. So I think the bottom up approach is that's where you're finding champions on every business process. That's where you're trying to find people that aren't driven by those kind of KPIs, where essentially every KPI can be gamed at the end of the day. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think about some of the recent projects I've been on where, we work with clients on assessing their current state, the more optimization projects, the net new implementations. And sometimes there's things where leadership thinks are going okay, and they don't know the details until they go down to the shop floor. They go talk to the accountant, and it turns out they're circumventing the process that everyone thought they were using, or they're using a different metric than you are actually measuring against. And I think you need to make sure you are always in touch with every step of the organization. Not everyone has to be a decision maker. Not everyone always wants to have to drive the initiative, but those ideas, the day to day, what's going to improve the business is going to come from any level, whether you're in management, C-level, or, an hourly wage worker. So I think that's important. I think that's a good point. And it's huge for change management. It's just like any other project of that size. The people are just as important. So, looks, especially now, I think when we're looking at what companies want to do with AI, it's very often automating what's considered simple or low skilled tasks. That's
Yeah.
taking away maybe from those workers, or could be changing what those workers are doing on a day-to-day basis. So working with them is only going to make any solution stronger.
You said something there that I want to come back to, and I'd love to get your thoughts, some more thoughts on it. You had said, this kind of concept of like, you just said it. Now I can't quote you, but you essentially went to, as AI is kind of replacing kind of menial, tedious tasks, and we think about like in your example, like hourly workers. I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of let's game that out. Let's think about this from like I'm starting to see this today. I'd love to see your thoughts on like how it goes from like today to the next 2 years on this perspective of, are you seeing this desire to get out of Outlook and get out of Teams and get out of like technology and be more PvP kind of situation, now
Yeah,
that
I
AI
mean,
is like automating so many other things?
I think, um, if I look at our customers, I don't know if I have numbers to necessarily back this up, but I feel like definitely you're getting asked that question more of, we have this customer service agent who's really just reading emails or taking phone calls and then doing data entry, and it's not really adding value, but it's something we have to do. And that's been a problem or discussion for a long time when it comes to retail, driving things through websites and chatbots. Those have been around for forever to help with customer service and order entry and returns and things like that. So I do see that shift happening even more so now with agents, right? If we get customers that send in emails in 5 different templates and formats, and we need to really, it takes us a long time to really ingest those and get them into the right way. And then we have to manually enter the system, or maybe even we import them into the system. It's just a lot of wasted time. So things like that, we are seeing a much larger growth in at least customers asking, what are the capabilities? What are the possibilities? Which pieces should or should we not automate? Um, Whether or not, I can say we've seen a huge increase in revenue or, customers just because of that's tough to say. But definitely, I think those types of experiences, we're seeing customers at least investigating more or wanting to know more. Can we do this? Can we get rid of headcount in this space and maybe use those people elsewhere? I think where I'm curious, I don't want to say nervous, but curious about is, if everyone pushes to that, what does a company's culture become? What does a company's brand become, right? We're
Right.
taking the human element out of it, and that might solve efficiency problems in some cases, that might solve cost problems in other cases, but how do we still differentiate ourselves as a business if that's where everyone is going? I'm really curious to see that. I know how some of us are trying to do it in the partner space. How are customers going to embrace their brand with these technologies to still advance themselves in the market?
Yeah, really good point. I think there are plenty of kind of nerdy articles coming out nowadays, specifically talking about that topic. So, as you can imagine, you can set up an LLM to uh, run a theoretical test, and like, hey, I've got XYZ happening to me. What do you recommend I do? And the articles that I've seen lately have been, almost a transformation in business development and intelligence, where they're just essentially departments that do research on their competitors. And that entire department is starting to switch to using LLMs to say, hey, I'm assuming that company is using LLMs. What is the probability that this is how they're going to react? And then knowing this reaction, they can already predict the next move and beat them at their own game. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a fascinating, play and exploit that we have, and I'm very excited to see how that works, because it essentially is like, as people start to trust AI more and more and more, we're going to start to see predictability uh, in the market, but we're also going to see companies essentially be the same. So they're like, what is that differentiator?
So I know you have a hard stop. I will say on this topic, one really fascinating thing I saw is, and who knows, maybe AI is deep faking us with this one, but they're saying Allbirds is switching entirely into AI. They're like
I saw
transitioning
that,
and going over there. So clearly it's
like a
changing
shoe
how companies
company.
think and
Like,
strategize. And we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what it brings.
I'm very excited to see a shoe release that I can just like be
Maybe they
like,
just had the best data ever, and that's how they became this, shoe dad company, and now they'll exploit the rest of it.
I'm still waiting for Airwalks to come back, the old skateboard shoe brand.
And make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
be the Microsoft ERP sponsor.
yes. Click down below for a promo up
Yeah,
20% off
subscribe
your
here.
Airwalks. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Beau. I appreciate your time and energy, and
Thank
keep
you.
putting out those blogs and tailor tips.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to your next blog.
Whenever I get to it, these fingers still work, I think, so we'll try.